All right, you gotta hear this story. Back in 2016, a team of hackers was this close to pulling off one of the biggest heists of all time. We're talking about almost $1 billion. Seriously, they had the perfect plan, they had the skills, they were about to just vanish.
But then the whole thing just fell apart. And not because of some fancy security system or a super smart detective. Nope. It all came down to a single, simple spelling mistake. Yeah, you heard me, a typo.
Let that number sink in for a second. $951 million. That's how much money was on the line. That was the prize for what was supposed to be the perfect digital crime. I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible? How could one tiny mistake completely blow up such a massive, sophisticated plan? Well, stick around because that's exactly what we're going to break down right now.
Okay, so to really get how this all went down, we need to rewind a bit. We've got to understand the playground these hackers were in. We're talking about the high-stakes world of central banks and global finance.
So, our story really kicks off at Bangladesh Bank, which is, the country's main bank. And like a lot of central banks, they keep billions of their US dollar reserves in a super secure account at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. This is totally normal, but man, it also painted a huge, juicy target on their back. Now, you can't just, waltz into the New York Fed and ask for $1 billion. To move that kind of money between countries, banks use a system called SWIFT. The easiest way to think about it is like a hyper-secure WhatsApp for banks. It's how they send encrypted instructions to move trillions, yes, trillions of dollars around the world every single day. Usually, this process is rock solid. One bank sends a verified SWIFT message, the other bank confirms it's legit, and bam, the money moves. The whole thing is built on trust and security. The key word there, though? Usually. But this was anything but normal. These hackers weren't just taking wild guesses. Oh no, they were patient, they were methodical, and they had an absolutely brilliant plan to use this super secure system against itself. This wasn't some quick smash and grab job. They got into the bank's network way back in January 2016, probably using some kind of malware. And then for weeks, they did nothing. They just watched. They were like digital ghosts, just silently learning all the bank's procedures, figuring out exactly how to make their fake requests look 100% real. Then, in early February, they decided it was go time. And their timing? It was genius. Absolutely genius. They decided to hit on a Thursday night in Bangladesh. Why? Because that meant the bank's offices were closed for their weekend, which is Friday and Saturday. But over in New York, it was still Friday, a totally normal, busy workday. It was the perfect window of opportunity to move all that cash while literally no one was in the office to notice. And of course, they had their getaway all planned out. The money wasn't going to some obvious personal bank account. No way. It was all being routed to a bunch of fake accounts at a bank in the Philippines and also to a completely made-up charity in Sri Lanka called the Shalika Foundation. The whole setup was designed to wash the money clean and make it vanish forever. So, with everything perfectly in place, on the night of February 4th, while the employees of Bangladesh Bank were all heading home for the weekend, the hackers made their move. The heist was on. And they didn't just send one or two requests. They unleashed a flood of them. We're talking about 36 fake SWIFT messages. And get this, to cover their tracks, they even hacked the bank's printer so it wouldn't print out the receipts for these transfers. So clever, right? It bought them even more time. And at first, it was working, like perfectly. The New York Fed started processing the requests. The money started to move. Before anyone had a clue what was going on, $101 million was already out the door. You can just imagine the hackers, right? Probably celebrating, thinking they'd pulled it off. Their plan was a massive success. But they were about to get a very expensive lesson that in a billion-dollar crime, it's the tiniest details that can trip you up. And one word was about to bring their entire operation down. And there it is. That is the billion-dollar typo. In one of the requests, this one was for $20 million, which was supposed to go to that fake charity, the Shalika Foundation. They misspelled foundation. They spelled it Fandation. This one little typo set off a huge chain reaction. See, an employee at a bank that was routing the money, Deutsche Bank, just happened to spot the misspelling. It just looked off. So they did what they're supposed to do. They paused the transfer and shot a message back to Bangladesh Bank asking for clarification. But of course, nobody was there to answer. That one little pause, that was all it took. The alarm was tripped. That typo immediately raised a ton of red flags over at the New York Fed, which, by the way, was already getting a little suspicious about the huge number of transfer requests. This spelling mistake was the final piece of evidence they needed. It was proof that something was seriously wrong. So they slammed on the brakes and halted all the remaining transfers. That's $850 million right there, all because of a single letter. So the typo saved most of the money, which is incredible, but the story is far from over. I mean, the hackers still made off with a fortune, and the fallout from this was just massive. It kicked off this huge international investigation to hunt down the digital ghosts who were behind it all. So, when all the dust settled, what did the final numbers look like? Well, the good news is they stopped $850 million from being stolen. The bad news? The hackers still successfully got away with $81 million. That money was funneled through a bunch of casinos in the Philippines to wash it clean. And out of that $81 million, only about $15 million was ever seen again. And as you can imagine, the blame game started almost immediately. Bangladesh Bank was pointing its finger at the New York Fed. The Fed fired back saying, hey, we just followed the rules. And that bank in the Philippines, RCBC, it got hit with some massive fines for its part in laundering all that cash. So the big question is, who was behind it all? Well, after a lot of digging, all the forensic evidence pointed to a group called the Lazarus Group. These guys are a pretty notorious state-sponsored hacking team with known links to North Korea. The theory is they use cybercrime like this to basically fund the regime. And while they did indict one programmer, the real masterminds, yeah, they're still out there. It's truly unbelievable when you think about it. These hackers spent months planning, they broke into a central bank's systems, and in the end, they were stopped by a simple spelling mistake, a mistake that cost them almost $900 million. I think it's safe to say this is, without a doubt, the most expensive typo in all of human history. And you know, this whole thing leaves us with a really fascinating question. We live in this age of AI and automation, where everything is run by complex algorithms. But this story, it's such a powerful reminder of the human element. It shows that one tiny, simple human error can still change absolutely everything. In a world that's getting more and more automated, you have to wonder, will that ever stop being true? It's definitely something to think about.